Hey everybody, this is Friendo. In a few hours, I'm going to be getting on a plane and heading back to the US for the holidays. I'll be back for about 3 weeks, after which I'll return here to Korea and look for another job. Making a response today to my good friend Fractal Machine, who made his response to the Skeptical Heretic. I noticed there was no comments or response on your video, and that made me sad. So here's my reply to you. In your video, you are making a claim based on a moral premise that men should have some buffer, some amount of time to abdicate their responsibility to a child that they didn't want, because that's only fair, since women have the option of abdicating their responsibility. And I find this to be an incredibly flawed argument. I mean, I can understand where you're coming from, saying women have this choice and men have no reciprocal choice, no equivalent choice, and that's unfair. And from the perspective that you have assumed, I get your point. It is unfair in that regard. However, the perspective that I have comes from a wider point of view, me not as part of the couple, looking at the couple. And what I see is that when a child is born, the child has requirements: food, clothing, shelter, medicine, education, nurturing, care, support. And the parents are the ones responsible for providing that, whether they wanted to have a child or not. If they initially decided to have a child and got tired of it, whatever the reasons are why they might object to having a child, once it's extant, once it exists, it's impaneled with human rights, civil rights, and needs that have to be cared for. These are obligations. They are not optional. These things have to occur. And in the case of a woman electing to have an abortion, because I think we would both agree it's unethical to force a woman to have an abortion that she doesn't want, or to tell her that she can't have an abortion that she does, depending on the time frame. I think we'd agree on that point. But what you have here is a case where there is no child. There is no individual human being with their own needs for shelter, clothing, education, and so on. And in the other case, you are talking about a man having the legal recourse of pretending that the child doesn't exist. And I'm sorry, I see nothing fair in that. I see that to be a morally spurious argument. It's based on a false equivalency, apples and oranges, that pretending that something didn't happen and actually eliminating the consequences of an action are in no way equitable. And drawing the line the way you have is not at all fair. And the purpose of the system, the way that we have it, is to the greatest possible extent to keep children under the care of their biological parents. Perhaps there are other ways of doing it, but as opposed to having these large, massive, uncaring orphanages, these state institutions, as opposed to just leaving children on the street to whatever, to starve, to be exploited, to be turned into thieves and pickpockets or prostitutes, or to be put in factories or coal mines, or all the other horrible things that were done to children before the laws were changed to be the kind of progressive system that they are today. Well, instead, today we set forth a moral standard that what's fair is for children to be the responsibility of the man and the woman who produced them, if that is at all possible. Now, I've also heard, as a tangent or a addendum to this, if one party of an action does not have 50% of the choice, then why should they pay 50% of the cost? And I think that is a fair point. But if you crunch the numbers, as Hannibal has done, I think you find that, again, it's a false equivalency. It's simply untrue that men who are paying child support pay 50% of the cost of raising a child. It's It's nowhere near that. Now, the financial responsibility, the burden that men do feel is purely in proportion to what their responsibility is as a distant biological father of an unwanted child. If their girlfriend gets an abortion, they're not obligated to pay 50% of the abortion, even though they presented 50% of the genetic material. They're not on the hook to help her go into counseling or listen to her grieve or cry. They're not on the hook to physically be in the home that they don't want to be. It's a simple proportional proposition that the extent to which they are responsible for the life of this child existing, they're responsible for maintaining its state of being. And no, I don't think that that system is at all unfair. I do think it would be unfair to have a system where we are equating a real, actual, tangible action that negates the consequences, equating that with someone making a conscious choice to pretend that the real extant consequences simply don't exist.